that the Supreme Court is using religion to alter what should be secular law. I mean, generally speaking, I make this point in the article, Democrats don't like to talk about religion. I mean, Democrats, typically you ask them about religion and politics, and they'll point out that Thomas Paine and Benjamin Franklin were atheists, and Thomas Jefferson and a bunch of the other founders were deists, which was very popular in the 1780s, 1770s. Deists are not Christians, and they're very close to atheists. They think that something started the universe, and it's just run according to natural law ever since. And that in two different places in the Constitution explicitly says that religion can't interfere with government, and government can't interfere with religion. That's, you know, this is the story that Democrats will tell you. But the point that I make in the article at HartmannReport.com today is that it's time to discuss religion whether we like it or not, because it's no longer just knocking on our door. Sam Alito just sent it into the House with a no-knock warrant and stun grenades that threaten to catch the place on fire. I mean, this is the Dobbs v. Jackson draft opinion that has been leaked. And, of course, the entire right wing, they don't want to talk about the fact that abortion is going to be illegal, because they're figuring out that a very small minority, about 26% of Americans, are in favor of abortion being illegal. The vast majority of Americans want basically Roe v. Wade. And in other words, some regulation of abortion, a lot of regulation of abortion in the third trimester, some regulation in the second trimester, and basically, you know, wide open in the first trimester. And so there are two premises that the court, or that Alito uses in his draft opinion, two main premises. The first is that the Supreme Court has no business recognizing a right that is not part of the history and tradition of America. Now, the right not to be a slave, you know, I suppose you could. Anyway, this is just a right-wing canard, you know. This has been used by these guys to argue against pretty much every form of modernity since, probably since the automobile. It's certainly been used against, in favor of maintaining segregated public schools. More recently, it's been used against gay marriage. Well, there was no gay marriage when the founders were around. How dare you? And, you know, so Alito is saying, well, you know, having laws against abortion is part of our heritage. Turns out he's not so correct. I did a deep dive on this yesterday when I was researching this to write this op-ed. The year that Virginia got their anti-abortion law, and it was actually not even an anti-abortion law, it was a law regulating abortion, who could perform abortions, was 1847. That was the year that the American Medical Association incorporated. Why this coincidence? Well, because the anti-abortion laws, most of them that were passed in the 1800s, were not about religion. They were about saying that midwives could no longer deliver babies or perform abortions. This was exclusively the province of doctors. But I think it's really important to note that Ben Franklin had been dead more than a half a century when Virginia got its law. Mississippi got its first abortion regulation in 1839. George Washington had been dead a full 40 years at that point. This is not part of the history of, you know, the Revolutionary era in America. It's just very straightforward. South Dakota got their law regulating abortion in 1899, Delaware, Tennessee, and South Carolina, 1883, North Carolina, 1881, Kentucky, 1879. I did look this up. North Dakota, 1877, Utah and Georgia, 1876, Oklahoma, 1875. The first state, and pretty much the only state that wasn't regulating abortion for the benefit of male doctors, was Massachusetts in 1812. And Massachusetts was so filled with the religious right-wingers in 1812, well, and before that, you know, a century before that, that when Ben Franklin was 17 years old in 1723, he famously fled Massachusetts and moved to Philadelphia, specifically, as he writes about it at some length in his autobiography, specifically because the religious fanatics were running the state of Massachusetts. Which brings us to Alito's second point about why he wants to outlaw abortion, which is religion. He keeps repeating this phrase, unborn human beings, throughout the decision. But when is humanness real? This is a religious question. I mean, at one extreme end, you've got religions who argue that a baby isn't a baby until it draws its first breath. That, Genesis 2, right? This has been around for a long time, this idea. Then you have people who say, well, it's a human being at viability. That's what Roe v. Wade says. And then you've got, the old religious perspective, and Alito even references this in his decision, at quickening, which is typically around 22 weeks, where, the baby starts kicking. But there are some who say, no, it's a human being at fertilization. And you've got one major religion that says, no, it's a human being when God decides it's going to happen. And so, the couple are feeling horny and frisky and they're going to hop into bed, and therefore there can't be birth control because it's a human being functionally, even though the egg is not yet fertilized. These are essentially all questions of belief. They're all variations on when does a soul inhabit a body, which is a religious question. I mean, as recently as the 1960s, theologians were debating this stuff in the pages of Christianity Today and Christian Life magazine, etc. So, and in fact, Alito himself, he writes, there is ample evidence that the passage of anti-abortion laws was spurred by a sincere belief that abortion kills a human being. Yes, it's a belief. But this is just a piece of a larger fabric. Last year in Tandon v. Newsom, these same 5 right-wing justices went again too far for even John Roberts, ruling 5-4 that a person's religion was the basis for refusing to go along with COVID lockdowns. The year before that, they ruled basically the same thing in Roman Catholic Diocese of Brooklyn versus Cuomo. The churches could ignore public health orders and subject their parishioners to a deadly disease because of the personal belief of the leader of the church. The court picked up steam on this, with Burwell v. Hobby Lobby that said that employers can violate federal employment law if they want because of their personal beliefs, even if their employees don't share those beliefs. This had to do with insurance. Masterpiece Cake, the court ruled that a business can discriminate against their customers based on the business's religious belief, that the owner's belief that gay people are hated by God. And now religious people are free to claim a whole wide variety of exceptions from American law, from conditions of employment to even common decency, by simply shouting, I believe. So where is this going to go? I mean, under this draft Dobbs decision, women's bodies have legally become the property of the state, arguably from the moment of intercourse. Is this going to revive Mike Pence's period registry so that women can be tracked to identify abortions? Is the government going to mandate that women must collect and preserve the remains of miscarriages for burial with a licensed funeral home, as Mike Pence tried to put into law when he was governor of Indiana? I mean, this is an open assault on bodily autonomy, the right of women to make their own medical decisions, and the right of a family to choose to have or not to have children. And in my opinion, law in the United States should be based on secular consensus and the most recent science, not on somebody's religion. Roe v. Wade said, you don't have to go to an abortion clinic if you don't think that you should have an abortion. If you think abortions are wrong, don't get one. You don't even have to go into the parking lot. You can ignore it completely. But that's not where we're at right now. Every single member of this court who has signed on to this decision was put on the court by a president who did not win the majority of the vote, and was confirmed by a group of senators representing fewer than half of Americans. And this was engineered by, right-wingers who proudly proclaim their belief that America should be run along religious lines. We have to get out to vote this fall. Make sure that your voter registration is legitimate. It's still there. Particularly if you live in a red state with a Republican Secretary of State, they are purging Democrats as we speak.